Revenge with Karen. I knew the night was going to be a disaster when I saw the centerpiece. It was a 3-foot-tall ice sculpture of a human heart, dripping slowly onto a platter of lukewarm shrimp. It was a perfect metaphor for Graybridge Medical, cold, expensive, and slowly melting into a puddle of fishy incompetence. I was standing near the bar, nursing a club soda because I needed my wits sharp as a scalpel, watching the donors circulate. You know the type. Old money Massachusetts bloodlines, women with facelifts so tight they couldn't blink, and men who thought sexual harassment was just spirited conversation. As the Director of Regulatory Affairs, a fancy title that basically meant the woman who keeps us from getting sued, I was supposed to be schmoozing. Instead, I was calculating the liability insurance premiums for every slip and fall hazard in the room. Then, the doors swung open. The air pressure in the room actually dropped. Enter Dr. Ronald Kessler, the chief of surgery, the man, the myth, the absolute malpractice lawsuit waiting to happen. Kessler didn't walk, he glided, propelled by the sheer force of his own ego. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first car, and he had that specific surgeon glow, the kind that comes from God whispering in your ear that you're his favorite child. He was surrounded by his usual sycophants, 3 residents looking terrified, and a junior admin named Brad, who looked like he wanted to physically inhabit Kessler's skin. I adjusted my blazer. I hate these events. I'm 45 years old, I have a dual MD/MHA from Harvard, and I've saved this hospital from federal audits that would have shuttered the doors. But to men like Kessler, I was just staff. I was the help. It was the buzzing noise in the background of his genius. He spotted me. Of course he did. Predators always spot the one person in the room who isn't afraid of them. He beelined for the bar, his entourage parting the sea of donors. He was laughing loudly at his own joke, something about a spleen, I think. He stopped right in front of me, grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray, and took a sip. He didn't look at me. He looked through me, aiming his gaze at a wealthy donor's wife over my left shoulder. "Claire," he said. He pronounced my name like it was a diagnosis. "Glad you're here." "Dr. Kessler," I replied, keeping my voice level. Enjoying the evening, he swirled his drink, finally deigning to make eye contact. His eyes were cold, dead sharks swimming in a sea of scotch. "It's a bit cluttered, isn't it? Hard to move around with all the support staff clogging the arteries." I smiled. It was my compliance audit smile. The one I use right before I tell a department head they're $20,000 over budget. "We all play our part, Ronald." He chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Then he did it, the moment that sealed his fate. The moment the universe decided to hand me a loaded gun. He finished his champagne in one gulp. He looked around for a waiter to take the glass, couldn't find one, and looked back at me. He held the empty glass out. "Dear," he said, loud enough for the 3 major donors standing nearby to hear. "And empty this trash for me, would you? And while you're at it, tell the caterers the shrimp is rubbery." Chop, chop, nurse, nurse. The word hung in the air like a fart in an elevator. The donors froze. The residents looked at their shoes. Brad the sycophant suppressed a giggle. Now, I have immense respect for nurses. They run the hospital. But Kessler wasn't calling me a nurse out of respect. He was using it as a slur. He was stripping away my doctorate, my executive title, my 15 years of fixing his messes, and reducing me to a servant. He was telling the room, she is here to serve me. My hand twitched. For a second, just a microsecond, I fantasized about taking that crystal flute and introducing it to his nasal cavity at high velocity. But that's the amateur move. That's the emotional reaction. And I am nothing if not a professional. By the way, if you enjoy stories about arrogant men getting destroyed by administrative warfare, maybe hit subscribe. It helps the algorithm know that we enjoy seeing justice served cold. Thanks, team. I didn't take the glass. I let him hold it out there, his arm extended, looking like a statue of entitlement. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds. 10. It got awkward. The donor's wife coughed. "I think you've confused me with someone who works for you, Ronald," I said, my voice sweet as poisoned honey. "I'm sure you can find a bin. You're good at disposing of things you don't understand." I turned on my heel and walked away. But as I walked toward the exit, feeling his glare burning a hole in my Ann Taylor blazer, I wasn't angry anymore. Rage is hot. Rage is messy. What I felt was something much colder. It was the feeling of a judge signing a warrant. "Empty the trash," he had said. "Okay, Ronald," I whispered to the empty elevator as the doors closed, shutting out the noise of the gala. Challenge accepted. Because he was right. The hospital was cluttered. It was full of toxic waste, and I was the only one with the clearance to take it out. You have to understand, the trash comment didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the cherry on top of a sundae made of misogyny and God-complex excrement that I'd been forced to eat for 14 years. Dr. Ronald Kessler wasn't just a bad boss. He was a caricature of everything wrong with American medicine. He was the kind of guy who parked his Porsche in the expectant mother's spot because he delivered the babies, so he technically owned the spot. He was the kind of guy who referred to the female anesthesiologists as gas girls. Let me take you back to a Tuesday morning staff meeting 3 years ago. We were discussing the new JCAHO compliance standards, boring stuff, but vital if we wanted to keep our accreditation. I was presenting a slide deck on surgical site infection protocols. I had data showing that Kessler's team had a 4% higher infection rate than the national average, mostly because they treated hand-washing guidelines as suggestions. I was mid-sentence, explaining the correlation between scrub time and sepsis, when Kessler swung his feet up onto the mahogany conference table. "Claire, sweetheart," interrupted, not even looking up from his phone. "We're surgeons. We cut people open and save their lives. We don't need a lecture on soap from a woman whose biggest medical decision of the day is choosing between serif and sans serif fonts." The room went dead silent. The CFO, a spineless man named Gary who sweated profusely whenever conflict arose, laughed nervously. "Good one, Ron. I'm just saying," Kessler continued, looking around the room for approval. "The talent, she's the roadie. No one buys a ticket to see the guy who tunes the guitars. Move on to the budget, Clipboard Barbie, you're boring us." Clipboard Barbie, that name stuck. For 6 months, I'd walk into the cafeteria and hear residents whispering it. I'd see it scrawled on the whiteboard in the break room. It was a joke to them. To me, it was fuel. But here's the thing about men like Kessler. They think invisibility is an insult. They think that because they don't see you, you don't exist. But invisibility is a superpower. While Kessler was busy building his shrine to himself, accepting awards, doing TV interviews, sleeping with pharmaceutical reps, I was in the basement. Not literally, though our records department smells like damp cardboard and despair. I was in the digital basement. I have dual degrees. I graduated top of my class at med school, but I realized early on that I didn't have the stomach for the blood. I had the stomach for the bureaucracy. I loved the rules. I loved the red tape because red tape is what keeps the monsters in check. Every time Kessler insulted me, I filed a report. Not to HR. HR was useless, run by a woman who thought essential oils cured depression. I filed it in my own personal encrypted server. I documented everything. Time he threw a scalpel across or because the music wasn't loud enough. The time he adjusted a patient's chart to hide that he'd nicked an artery during a routine cholecystectomy. The time he expensed a consultation dinner that was actually a $3,000 strip club tab in Vegas. I had 14 years of data. Terabytes of his arrogance saved as PDFs. Most people get mad and scream. I get mad and organize. After the gala, I went home to my condo. It's a quiet place. Clean lines, no clutter, view of the river. I poured myself a glass of unauthorized Pinot Noir, my one vice, and sat in the dark. My cat, procedural error, I call her Pro for short, jumped onto my lap. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, illuminating my face. I wasn't just an administrator anymore. I was a hunter. "He thinks I'm a nurse," I told the cat. Pro purred, different to human suffering. "He thinks I empty the trash." I pulled up the hospital's organizational chart. Kessler was at the top of the surgical pyramid, untouchable, protected by the board because he brought in millions in donations. But money is a funny thing. It flows. And if you know how to look at the plumbing, you can see where it's leaking. I wasn't going to get him fired for being a jerk. Being a jerk is a requirement for chief of surgery. I was going to get him on the one thing the board cared about more than his talent: liability. I cracked my knuckles. The sound was loud in the empty apartment. "Let's see what happens when the trash takes itself out," I whispered. The file I opened wasn't the one I'd been keeping for years. It was a new one. I titled it Project Janitor. If he wanted me to clean up, I was going to scrub this place until it bled. Luck is just preparation meeting opportunity. My opportunity arrived 2 days after the gala, in the form of panicked phone call from the chairman of the board. Graybridge Medical was currently headless. Our hospital administrator had abruptly resigned to spend more time with his family at Reed. He was caught embezzling from the cafeteria fund to pay for his gambling addiction. The board was scrambling. They needed a steady hand. They needed someone boring. They needed me. I walked into the boardroom wearing my severe glasses, the thick black frames that say, "I read the terms and conditions." The chairman, Mr. Henderson, looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He was an investment banker who treated the hospital like a distressed asset. "Claire," Henderson said, gesturing to a seat, "we have a situation. With the administrator gone, we're exposing our underbelly to the auditors. The state is sniffing around. We need an interim compliance officer with executive authority, someone who knows where the bodies are buried." "I know where the bodies are buried, Mr. Henderson," I said, sitting down and smoothing my skirt. "And I know who dug the holes." He winced. "We need a clean sweep. We're hearing rumors about the surgical department." My heart didn't skip a beat. It slowed down. This was it. The door was cracking open. "Rumors are liability, sir," I said, slipping into the corporate dialect. "If there are irregularities in surgery, expose the endowment to catastrophic risk. We're talking massive malpractice suits, federal fraud investigations, the kind of things that make donors ask for their names back from the building wings." Henderson went pale. I knew his button. It wasn't patient care, it was the endowment. "What do you need?" he asked. "I need full autonomy," I said. "Unrestricted access to all departmental financials or logs and personnel files. No oversight from the medical chiefs. I report directly to you. And I want the title of interim administrator while you conduct your search. That's highly irregular. Kessler won't like reporting to you on compliance matters." "Dr. Kessler is a brilliant surgeon," I lied effortlessly, "but he's not a risk manager. Let him cut. Let me protect the hospital's money." Henderson sighed and signed the authorization form. "Fine, but keep it quiet. We don't want to spook the horses." I walked out of that meeting with a keycard that opened every door in the building and a login that could access the digital soul of Graybridge Medical. I didn't go to my new office immediately. I went to the IT department. I needed to make sure my new powers were absolute. The IT director, a guy named Kevin, who wore ironic t-shirts and hated everyone, liked me because I was the only executive who knew how to convert a PDF to a Word doc without calling him. "Kevin," I said, sliding a box of upscale donuts onto his desk, "I need you to mirror Kessler's hard drive, and I need access to the deleted items folder in his Outlook, going back 5 years." Kevin bit into a maple glaze. "Technically, that requires a subpoena." "Technically," I said, tapping my new badge, "I am the compliance authority. Consider this an internal audit." Kevin shrugged. "You got it, boss. That guy's a dick anyway. He called my server room a nerd aquarium. He won't be calling it anything for long, I promised." Back in my office, the administrator's office now, with the mahogany desk and the view of the city, I logged in. It was beautiful. The entire financial nervous system of the hospital was laid out before me. Every billing code, every supply order, every reimbursement request started with the discretionary spending accounts. These are slush funds meant for departmental improvements, new chairs, coffee machines, team building. Kessler's slush fund was active, very active. I saw charges for medical education materials totaling $50,000. I clicked deeper. The vendor was a company called Lux Logistics. I ran the vendor ID. It wasn't a medical supplier. It was a shell company registered to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. "Hello, lover," I whispered to the screen. Then I cross-referenced the dates. The charges always appeared a week before Kessler went on his medical conferences. I pulled up the flight logs. Date, February 14th. Destination, Cabo San Lucas. Charge, emergency medical transport consultation. Passenger manifest, Dr. Ronald Kessler and Miss Tiffany S., surgical assistant. I checked the HR database. We didn't employ a Tiffany S., but a quick check of Kessler's public Instagram, which he foolishly left unprivate because he loved the likes, showed him in Cabo on that date. And in the reflection of his sunglasses in a selfie, a blonde woman who definitely wasn't his wife, drinking a margarita the size of a toddler. I leaned back in my chair. The leather creaked. He wasn't just stealing. He was stealing stupidly. He was stealing with the arrogance of a man who thinks no one is watching, because no one includes the women he works with. I didn't print it yet. One receipt is an error. A pattern is a prison sentence. I needed more. I needed the bridge to collapse while he was standing on it. The key to a successful coup is that the dictator shouldn't know he's being overthrown until the guillotine blade is already whistling toward his neck. For the next 2 weeks, I was a phantom, moved through the hospital corridors with my clipboard, my weapon of choice, smiling at everyone. I approved vacation requests. I fixed the coffee machine in the ICU. I was the benevolent auntie of Graybridge Medical. Meanwhile, I was feeding the sharks. I printed out the Lux Logistics invoices, just a few of them, and accidentally left them on the copy machine in the legal department. Legal is like a pack of bloodhounds. If they smell a liability, don't stop digging. I knew their paralegal, a sharp kid named Marcus, would find them. Sure enough, 2 hours later, I got a ping on my internal chat. Marcus, legal. Hey Claire, did you leave these invoices? They look weird. The tax ID doesn't match the vendor registry. Me, oh, silly me. Just shred them, probably a glitch. I knew he wouldn't shred them. He'd frame them. While legal started sniffing around the money, I started working on the culture. I went to the scheduling nurse, a battle axe named Brenda who had been terrorized by Kessler for decades. Brenda, I said, leaning over her desk. I'm reviewing the on-call schedules. Is it true Dr. Kessler charges overtime for surgeries he's not even present for? Brenda's eyes went wide. I'm not supposed to say anything. He says he's consulting remotely. Remotely? I raised an eyebrow. From the golf course. From the clubhouse, she corrected. Calls in on speakerphone for the timeout, then bills for the whole 4 hours. Interesting, I said, making a show of writing it down. If you happen to have a log of those calls, strictly for compliance, of course, I could make sure you get that ergonomic chair you've been asking for. By noon, I had a spreadsheet of 47 instances of ghost surgery. That's a federal crime. That's Medicare fraud. That's the kind of thing the FBI puts on a vest for. The piece de resistance happened in the hallway of the surgical wing. I was walking with the HR director, a new one. I fired the essential oils lady on day 1, discussing the new harassment protocols. Kessler came storming out of or3, ripping off his mask. He was screaming at a second-year resident, a young woman who looked like she was about to dissolve into tears. You incompetent little waif. Kessler bellowed, his voice echoing off the sterile tiles. Asked for 3-0 Vicryl, not a 4-0. Do you want the patient to herniate? Are you trying to kill him, or are you just too busy thinking about your boyfriend to learn how to suture? The hallway froze. Nurses stopped charting. Patients in beds looked up. Kessler saw me. He sneered. And here comes the maid service, he shouted, gesturing at me. Claire, make yourself useful and get this idiot out of my sight. Maybe she can help you file papers. She's clearly not cut out for medicine. The old Claire would have looked down. The old Claire would have absorbed the toxicity like a sponge. The new Claire stopped. I looked at the HR director, who was furiously typing notes on her iPad. Then I looked at Kessler. Dr. Kessler, I said, my voice projecting perfectly. Are you aware that shouting at a subordinate in a patient care area is a violation of Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Code of Conduct, that creating a hostile work environment is grounds for immediate suspension of privileges? Kessler laughed. It was a loud, barking sound. Suspension? Who's going to suspend me? You. I generate 80% of the revenue in this wing. I am the hospital. Go back to your cubicle, clipboard Barbie. He stormed off, shouldering past me. I watched him go. The resident was sobbing now. I handed her a tissue. It's okay, I told her quietly. He's just loud noise. Take a break. As she walked away, the HR director looked at me. That was intense. It was, I agreed. Put it in the file, verbatim, maid service and all. You're building a case, aren't you? She asked. I smoothed my blazer. I'm not building a case, Sarah. I'm building a coffin. Kessler thought he was untouchable because he brought in the money. He didn't realize that I had just found out he was stealing the money he claimed to bring in. The trap was set. Bait was his own ego, and he had just swallowed it whole. The board meeting was scheduled for 7:00 a.m. on a Monday. We call these pajama meetings because the bad news usually comes before the coffee has kicked in. The conference room was cold, lit by the harsh gray light of a Boston morning. 10 men and 2 women sat around the oval table. These were the power players, real estate tycoons, biotech CEOs, people whose names were on the elevator plaques. I sat at the head of the table. Usually, the administrator sits to the right of the chairman. Today, I took the captain's chair. Mr. Henderson looked nervous. Claire, you requested this emergency session. You said it was regarding existential risk. I did, I said. I placed a single, thick binder on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. The sound of doom. Gentlemen, ladies, I began, opening the binder. We have a cancer. Stage 4, and we need to cut it out before it metastasizes to the press. I didn't start with the insults. Rich people don't care about feelings. I started with the numbers. Slide 1, I said, nodding to the projector. A spreadsheet appeared. It showed a red line spiking upward. This is the surgical department's discretionary spending over the last 5 years. You'll notice a correlation with Dr. Kessler's tenure as chief. Slide 2. Images of the invoices appeared. Lux Logistics, Cayman Islands. Dr. Kessler has billed the hospital $450,000 for medical education through a shell company. We traced the IP address used to generate these invoices. It matches the IP address of the Wi-Fi in Dr. Kessler's vacation home in Nantucket. A gasp went around the room. One of the biotech CEOs took off his glasses. He's embezzling? From the donor fund? It gets worse, I said, my voice steady. Slide 3. Pulled up the ghost surgery logs, the Medicare billing codes. Dr. Kessler has billed for concurrent surgeries. He claims to be in 2 operating rooms at once. Unless he has cloned himself, this is federal wire fraud. The Department of Justice calls this the False Claims Act. The penalty is treble damages plus prison time. If we don't self-report this immediately, the hospital is liable for the full amount. We're looking at a $20 million fine. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the HVAC system. The air smelled of expensive cologne and fear. And finally, I said, the personnel risk. I played a compilation of audio files. I'd had security pull the audio from the cameras. Kessler's voice filled the room. You stupid cow, gas girls. I am God in this room. I paused the recording. We have 3 sexual harassment suits pending in draft from nursing staff, I lied. They weren't drafted yet. I knew they would be once I leaked the info. If these go public, coupled with the fraud, Graybridge Medical becomes a pariah. We lose our magnet status. We lose the endowment. Henderson looked like he was going to vomit. What do we do? If we fire him, he'll sue. He'll go to the press. He's Kessler. He won't sue, I said, closing the binder. Why not? Because, I said, leaning forward, you're not going to fire him for the fraud. If you do that, it becomes public record. You're going to let me handle it. How? Henderson asked. Dr. Kessler is going to retire, I said, immediately, for health reasons. He's going to sign a non-disclosure agreement that ties his severance to his silence. And he's going to pay back the $450,000 to avoid criminal prosecution. He'll never agree to that, the biotech CEO said. His ego is too big. His ego is his weakness, I countered. Cares about his reputation more than his money. If we threaten to expose him as a fraud, not just a thief, but a bad doctor who fakes his surgical logs, he will fold. I know him. He'd rather be broke than be a laughingstock. Henderson looked at the other board members. They nodded slowly. The herd had decided. The sick animal had to be culled. Do it, Henderson said. But Claire, he can't know it's coming. If he gets wind of this, he'll destroy the records. He won't know. Promised? I've already locked him out of the server. As of 5 minutes ago, his badge only opens the front door and the bathroom. I stood up. One more thing, I said, the administrator position. I want the interim removed from my title. Today. Henderson didn't even blink. Done. Fix this, Claire, and the job is yours. I walked out of the boardroom. My hands weren't shaking. I felt light. I felt like the ice sculpture at the gala, cold, hard, and center stage. The bridge hadn't just collapsed. I had detonated the pilings, and Kessler was still driving his Porsche right toward the edge. By Wednesday, my name was on the door. Not a paper sign taped up with Scotch tape. A real, engraved brass plaque, Dr. Claire Lewis, hospital administrator. I spent the morning restructuring the org chart. I fired the sycophant Brad, sorry, Brad, but you were collateral damage, and promoted Brenda, the scheduling nurse, director of surgical operations, giving the people who actually do the work the power to manage it. Revolutionary concept, I know. I sat in my office looking at the final document, the termination of privileges order. It was drafted by legal, vetted by risk management, and signed by the chairman. All it needed was Kessler's acknowledgement, but I didn't want to mail it to him. That's too impersonal. And after 14 years of clipboard Barbie, I felt I deserved a moment of face-to-face customer service. Kessler had been away at a conference, ironically, a real one this time, for 3 days. He was due back tonight. Tonight was the Founders Circle Gala, yes, another gala. We have one every quarter. It's how we milk the rich. This gala was usually Kessler's playground. He'd hold court, tell his war stories, and solicit donations for his wing. I called security. Steve? Yes, Dr. Lewis. Dr. Kessler will be arriving tonight around 8:00 p.m. His badge is deactivated. Do not let him into the staff entrance. Direct him to the main event hall. Copy that. Should we escort him? No, I said, smiling at the phone. Let him walk in on his own. I want him comfortable. I spent the afternoon preparing. I didn't wear a blazer this time. I wore a dress. A sharp, midnight blue sheath dress that cost more than Kessler's emergency flight to Cabo. Put on heels that could puncture a lung. I pulled my hair back. I wasn't the help anymore. I was the executioner. At 6:00 p.m., I did a walkthrough of the ballroom. The staff looked nervous when they saw me. They knew there was a new sheriff in town, and they knew I actually read the budget reports. The flowers, I told the coordinator, they're wilting. Replace them. But Dr. Lewis, that will cost. We have the budget, I said. Just saved $450,000 in consulting fees. At 7:00 p.m., the donors started arriving. I greeted them by name. I asked about their grandchildren. I remembered who was gluten-free. This is what Kessler never understood. Power isn't about shouting. Power is about information. Power is knowing that Mrs. Vanderbilt hates lilies and making sure there are no lilies at her table. By 7:45 p.m., the room was buzzing. Anderson gave me a nod from across the room. He looked relieved. He knew the hit was scheduled. At 8:15 p.m., he arrived. Kessler swept in like a conquering hero. He was tan from his conference, probably a tanning bed. He was wearing a velvet tuxedo jacket. Velvet. The man was a walking cry for attention. He didn't check in at the desk. He just breezed past security, who let him go as instructed. He grabbed a drink. He started working the room. I watched him from the shadows of the stage. He was laughing, touching people's shoulders, basking in the adoration. He had no idea he was a ghost. He had no idea that everyone in the inner circle, the board, the senior staff, legal, was looking at him not with awe, but with pity. He made his way toward the front. He spotted a group of interns near the buffet. Old habits die hard. He walked over to them. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw the body language. He pointed a finger at a young male intern's chest. The intern shrank back. Kessler laughed and clapped him on the shoulder, too hard. It was time. I picked up the clipboard. Yes, I brought a clipboard to a black tie gala. It was poetic justice. It was the symbol of my oppression, and now it was the instrument of his destruction. I walked down the steps of the stage. The crowd parted. They sensed the energy. I wasn't schmoozing. I was hunting. I walked straight toward him. Ballroom floor was marble, and my heels clicked against it with a rhythm that sounded like a ticking clock. Click, click, click. Kessler was deep in a story, holding court with a captivated audience of 2 wealthy widows and a confused cardiologist. So I told the anesthesiologist, if you drop the pressure any lower, I'm going to have to inflate him myself. Can you imagine? He roared with laughter. The widows tittered nervously. I stopped 3 feet behind him. Dr. Kessler, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the ambient noise like a diamond cutter. He turned slowly, annoyed at the interruption. When he saw it was me, his face relaxed into that familiar, condescending smirk, the smirk that had haunted my nightmares for a decade. Ah, Claire, he said, raising his glass. I see you're playing dress-up tonight. Nice color. Slimming. A few people nearby gasped. The insult was so casual, so reflexive. You brought your clipboard, he exclaimed, gesturing to the leather folder in my hand. Is there a spill on aisle 4, or are you just taking drink orders? He looked around at his audience, expecting laughter. But no one laughed. The widows looked away. The cardiologist took a step back. They sensed the shift in barometric pressure. Actually, Ronald, I said, stepping into his personal space. I dropped the doctor. I dropped the deference. I'm here to correct a clerical error. Clerical error? He rolled his eyes. God, you people and your paperwork. Can't it wait until Monday? I'm in the middle of securing a donation. It can't wait, I said, because as of 5:00 p.m. today, you don't accept donations for Graybridge Medical. He frowned. The first crack in the armor. Excuse me? You don't have privileges here anymore, I said, my voice projecting just enough for the board members nearby to hear. Your badge has been deactivated. Your office has been sealed by security. And your access to the hospital servers, specifically the billing logs you've been adjusting, has been revoked. He stared at me. His brain was trying to process the information, but his ego was rejecting the transplant. Is this a joke? He hissed, stepping closer. Because if this is some kind of power play, Claire, I will have your job. I will have you scrubbing bedpans in the geriatric ward by tomorrow morning. I don't think so, I said, calm as a frozen lake. I held out the clipboard. Sign this, Ronald. He looked at it. I don't sign for nurses. There it was. The callback, the refrain. I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. A smile of absolute, terrifying victory. It's not a delivery receipt, I said. It's your resignation letter. voluntary retirement, effective immediately, citing personal health reasons. He knocked the clipboard out of my hand. It clattered to the floor. Papers splayed out. Music stopped. The string quartet actually stopped playing. The entire room turned to look. "I am the chief of surgery," he screamed, his face turning a mottled red. "I bring in the money. I am the talent. You are nothing. You are a glorified secretary with a delusion of grandeur." I didn't pick up the clipboard. I let it lie there between us. "Pick it up," he ordered. "Pick it up and get out of my face." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat forming on his brow. I looked at the fear behind his eyes, the fear of a man who suddenly realizes the ground isn't solid. "No," I said. I signaled to the back of the room. Two large men in dark suits stepped forward. Not hospital security, private contractors. I'd hired them specifically for this because they didn't know who he was and didn't care. "Mr. Henderson," I called out without looking away from Kessler. The chairman of the board stepped out of the crowd. He looked grim. "Ronald," Henderson said quietly, "it's over. You're making a scene." Kessler spun around. "Henderson, tell this woman to stand down. She's insane. She's the administrator," Ronald, Henderson said, "and she's acting with the full authority of the board." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. Kessler looked from Henderson to me. He looked at the donors, who were now staring at him like he was the one who needed to be taken out with the trash. "Administrator," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "You can sign the paper on the floor and walk out with your pension and a shred of dignity, or you can leave in handcuffs for fraud. I have the FBI on speed dial, and I'm feeling very efficient tonight." The choice hung in the air, pension or prison. Kessler looked at the two large security guards. They were checking their watches, bored. They weren't impressed by his velvet jacket. They weren't impressed by his surgical hands. To them, he was just another package to be removed. Looked at me. For the first time in 14 years, he really saw me. He saw the intelligence, the patience, the steel spine that he had mistaken for subservience. "You planned this," he rasped. "You set me up." "I didn't set you up, Ronald," I said softly. "I just turned on the lights. You're the one who made the mess." He looked down at the clipboard on the marble floor. It was 3 feet away from his polished loafers. To reach it, he would have to bow. He would have to kneel. Hesitated, he looked at the exit. "The police are waiting in the lobby," I lied. They weren't, but fear is a powerful motivator. If you walk out that door without signing, they come in. He let out a sound, half sigh, half whimper. Slowly, painfully, the great Dr. Kessler bent his knees. His tuxedo pants strained. He went down on one knee like he was proposing. But he was proposing to his own defeat. He reached out and picked up the clipboard, picked up the pen that had rolled under a table. His hands were shaking. The surgeon's hands, the golden hands, were trembling like leaves in a gale. He scribbled his signature on the line. It was a jagged, ugly scrawl. He stood up, clutching the clipboard. He held it out to me. I didn't take it. "Put it on the table," I said, gesturing to a cocktail table nearby. "I don't touch trash." The color drained from his face completely. He looked like a corpse. Placed the clipboard on the table with a trembling hand. "Are we done?" He choked out. "We?" I asked. "There is no we, Ronald. I am done. You are leaving." I nodded to the guards. "Please escort Mr. Kessler to his vehicle," I said. "Mr. Kessler. Not Dr. Mister, and ensure he doesn't re-enter the premises. If he does, charge him with trespassing." One of the guards stepped forward and took Kessler by the elbow. It wasn't a gentle grip. It was the grip you use on a drunk at a dive bar. "Let's go, pal," the guard grunted. Kessler tried to shake him off. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," the guard said. "You're the guy who was just fired." They began to march him toward the double doors. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, shrinking away from him to avoid the contagion of failure. He looked back one last time. He looked at the hospital he thought he owned, looked at the donors he thought loved him. And then he looked at me. I raised my glass of club soda in a silent toast. "Cheers, Ronald." The door swung shut behind him, cutting off his silhouette. The room was deadly silent for 3 seconds. Then I turned to the string quartet. "Please," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. "Continue playing. I believe we were celebrating the future of the hospital." The cellist scrambled to find her bow. Music started up again, Vivaldi's Spring. Upbeat, hopeful, clean. Mr. Henderson walked up to me. He picked up the clipboard from the table. He looked at the signature. "Ruthless," he murmured, "absolutely ruthless." "Compliance," I corrected him. "It was just compliance." Kessler's departure was like lancing a boil. There was a moment of pain, a lot of gross stuff came out, and then relief, immediate, throbbing relief. The next morning, the hospital felt different. Air was lighter. Residents were walking through the halls without that hunted look in their eyes. Nurses were laughing at the nurses' station. I was in my office, going over the morning census. The phone rang. It was Brenda from surgery. Dr. Lewis, she said. She sounded cheerful. I just wanted to let you know. We're running 10 minutes ahead of schedule in the OR. First time in 6 years. Excellent work, Brenda, I said. Keep it up. And, Claire, yes, thank you. She hung up. I swiveled my chair to look out the window. Below, in the parking lot, I could see the spot where Kessler used to park his Porsche. It was empty. I'd already ordered the reserved for Chief of Surgery sign to be taken down. It was now reserved for Employee of the Month. Petty? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. Kessler didn't sue. He took his severance, moved to Florida, and is currently trying to start a concierge medicine practice for retired golfers. Here the Yelp reviews are brutal. Turns out you can't scream at rich retirees the way you scream at residents. As for me, I run a tight ship. We're under budget. Our infection rates are down. Our liability premiums have dropped 15%. And every now and then when I'm walking through the lobby, I see a piece of trash on the floor, a wrapper, a coffee cup. I don't call a janitor. I don't bark a nurse. I bend down, pick it up, and throw it in the bin, because I'm the administrator, and cleaning up the mess is my job. So, to all the Kesslers out there, strutting around in your velvet jackets, thinking you're gods because you can hold a scalpel, remember the women with the clipboards. Remember the people in the background. We're watching. We're documenting. We're saving the receipts. And sooner or later, we're going to take out the trash.
Office battles aren't won in meetings, but in silence after the meeting ends. This one was a reminder that timing is everything. Thanks for listening out. More stories ahead.